Yeah, I think technology can sometimes be an enabler and sometimes not be an enabler. So Sunny is facing the later problems at this point of time. So we will continue this interesting discussion which we have assembled for. And as what we were saying is that we are living in an interesting time of pandemic century. And as we are getting into it, the entire pace of digitization in every industry and sector has accelerated. And the most acceleration which has been seen in the last 20 years has been during these pandemic times in the banking and financial services. So, with this background, I would like to put my first question to Ashutosh. Ashutosh, we are seeing a big inflection point of consumer behavior at this point of time. People tell me from banking world that people of all age and segments which were not thought to be going into digital banking are doing digital transactions and the uptake has been really very high. As somebody who is creating a completely new payments bank, that how are you going about it and what are you thinking as to how you will be relevant to the consumer in this new reality?
Sure. Thank you, Anupam. Good morning to all the fellow panelists. So, Anupam, before I zoom in on some of the shifts and trends that we are anticipating to see in the digital financial services space, you also mentioned about we being at a very interesting inflection point as far as banking in India goes. So I think any reference to the stage we have reached at would be incomplete without talking about the last 10 to 12 years. So I think what has really happened in the last 10 to 12 years has changed the face of banking in the country. I think there is growing recognition worldwide that when it comes to delivery of financial services, when it comes to onboarding experiences, India is at least a few years ahead of its Western counterparts. And I mean that has mostly been on the back of the public sector initiatives, the central government initiatives, a proactive central bank that have come together and made this possible. So what has really happened in the last 10 to 12 years, which has brought us to this inflection point? So while, post independence for the first 60 years, banking was obviously just trudging along. But what has really happened in the last 10 to 12 years were a lot of initiatives such as, if I could go back to 2008, 2009, the year in which NPCI and UIDAI were formed. You had your first Aadhaar card issued, digital identity for every Indian. First Aadhaar card issued in 2010. So, if I could just draw up a list of chronological events that have got us to where we are today, I think I'll have to start with Aadhaar. So, Aadhaar, digital ID for every Indian, a dream project, and to see it materialize and actualize in such a short span of time is obviously kudos to the initiatives and efforts of everyone involved. So that started with Aadhaar. Then you had eKYC in about in 2 years' time. eKYC was launched. So using eKYC, I did not have to worry about as a bank. I did not have to really worry about fake document dealing with fake documents on ID. So eKYC with just a fingerprint and an Aadhaar card, it really gave a massive thrust to the whole social inclusion push of the government. Another very key milestone along this in this journey happened in 2015 when e-sign was launched. So now using Aadhaar, eKYC, and e-sign, your digital onboarding was completely sorted. So whereas our counterparts in the Western world are still figuring out how to really get onto this digital bandwagon in terms of onboarding customers, let alone in terms of the payment solutions. So we've already hit our stride when it comes to digital onboarding customers. And after 2015, you had another breakthrough, and that was this time on the payment side. UPI was launched in 2016. For the first year, we clearly saw a lot of struggle in terms of UPI taking off. But then when the ecosystem players such as Paytm, Google, they got into their act, we saw a sudden spike in UPI transactions, and today we've reached a juncture where UPI transactions has beaten hollow all the debit card, credit card transactions put together. It's almost on a even keel with IMPS transactions. In the last couple of months, has actually surpassed even the ATM cash withdrawals. So on the back of initiatives like these, EKYC, e-sign, Aadhaar, UPI, India has reached a stage where I think we are clearly years ahead in terms of financial service delivery vis-a-vis our Western counterparts. And now, as we look ahead, we are now obviously we're talking about completing the India stack. So while you have Aadhaar, you have UPI. The third missing piece is the account aggregator piece, which will completely invert the data paradigm and give a chance to the customer to decide where and how his data should flow. So I think once the India stack is completed, we as a country are poised to actually make our next orbit shift into digital financial services. So with this in mind, I think we can now we can segue into the trends that we anticipate, or that at least I see playing out in my assessment. Coming to the trends, let me just preface that by simply saying that most of these trends and most of these shifts were already underway. Banks had been working on most of these trends and shifts. Just that COVID-19 has provided a certain forward momentum to all these trends. So I'll straight away jump into the trends. The first big trend that comes to my mind is technology itself. So going ahead, I feel in the Indian banking space, there will be a higher allocation and a deeper commitment to driving the technology agenda. And this is going to happen mainly as banks in the ecosystem realize that they are essentially going to be eventually technology companies delivering financial services to their customers. So with this growing realization and a change in philosophy of banks, what will happen is I see two emerging outcomes. One is the proactive role of the CEO. So while the technology function was, up until 2 or 3 years ago, was the preserve of the CTO and in a few cases delegated to chief operating officers and chief financial officers, you will see CEOs driving the tech agenda going forward because technology is no longer a business enabler. It is actually front and center. With that, you will see that change. You will see the CEOs driving the tech agenda in most companies. And another important outcome of this change in philosophy will be the change in composition of the IT spends. So, up until 2-3 years ago, 70, 80, 90% of your IT spends were mostly on keeping the lights on, maintenance or OPEX money. And maybe if you're lucky, you were able to spend 10, 20% on developmental capex. I see a real shift happening there. With most companies obviously allocating higher budgets to developmental capex, as increasingly companies move towards native cloud architectures from their legacy architectures, as companies increasingly move towards open source softwares from buying bespoke licensed softwares, as companies move from big machines to small machines. So clearly, with all these things happening, you will see a lot of efficiencies being realized, a lot of cost savings being realized, and that way the companies will truly be able to transform themselves in the way they offer services to their customers. So technology is one big change which I anticipate and I see playing out in the coming years. Next is, I think most banks, if they have not yet started, they will definitely start it in all earnest. They will bid farewell to the big distribution networks, to big branches, to ATMs. So clearly the physical footprint of banks is going to come down. In the last 2-3 years, we've already seen signs of that. In the last 2-3 years, we've seen almost flattish to no growth in terms of the ATM networks in the country. Banks are getting increasingly circumspect about adding new branches. So that is a trend which I expect to continue as companies move on to process automation, realize efficiencies there. You could have another HR dimension to all this, where it could be to begin with a recruitment freeze, maybe in some time, followed by no replacement hire, and obviously companies will look at reskilling and repositioning their existing staff to roles that are more technology oriented, to roles that are more innovation oriented. So there will be impact on this. There is an HR angle to this as well. So this is what I anticipate as a second trend, where clearly goodbye to big branches, big offices, So that's the second trend I see. Third trend is more of a culture change, and I think this is going to be a big culture change. What this COVID period has taught us is I think the trust we started having in our employees, and the employees are having towards each other, has really grown. Despite the challenges of working from small homes where you have kids shouting on top of their voices, parents watching TV at full blast, employees have really put in their heart and soul and still try to move the company forward in terms of its goals. So I think there is going to be an increasing amount of trust with regard to employees, which would mean that the policies with regard to leaves, flexible working hours, with regard to work from home, that will see a major shift. So that's a third big shift, and that's on the culture side. Uh, the fourth shift that I see happening in this space is going to be on the analytics side. So I think gone are the days where it was B2C. I think customers are getting very demanding because they are drawing their expectations from experiences they're having across the other e-com platforms. It could be Amazon, Uber. For the millennials and the centennials, it really doesn't matter whether it is Uber or his financial services platform. He wants the same experience. So I think companies will really need to invest a lot into developing BRU and analytical tools. It is going to be B to me. It is no longer about B to C, the cohort, the consumer cohorts, the consumer groups. It is what you, the company, do for me, the customer. So I think we're going to see an increasing shift, mainly because the customers together their act in terms of delivering hyper personalized services to their consumers. So that's a fourth big shift that I see happening, where the companies will really be investing heavily into developing analytical capabilities. Uh, then obviously when you see all this movement on digital platforms, cyber security threats, I mean, that is serious and that is real. So companies will also have to really ring fence. They'll have to think about how do they actually secure their perimeters, IT infrastructures by erecting firewalls, ensuring that the intrusions are limited. How do you also educate the customer so that the wishing, phishing, and social engineering attacks that are going on, as even the recalcitrant and the hesitant consumers have started adopting to technology in a big way. So companies will have to be conscious of that as well. Uh, then, apart from these five, there is another one I wanted to talk about, which was basically about open banking. I mean, that's a nice segue into the next topic for you. So I think banking, even the fintechs are increasingly realizing that the value chain is getting unbundled, it's getting disaggregated. Today, no bank can really control the whole value chain. Fintechs are extremely agile, they are extremely nimble, they are extremely innovative. So these fintechs are doing a great job in picking up features from the value chain and building whole business models around it. So, as there is this increasing realization, banks will progressively be more open to the idea of exploring partnerships with fintechs. Uh, that's where you see the emerging trends of banking as a service, open banking, call it what you like. So I think these trends will obviously hold sway in the coming years. And obviously UI UX is a last one. So I think UI UX, like I've already pointed out, customers don't care. They have experience. They have a certain set of expectations which they derive from their experiences on Uber, Amazon, and they want you to deliver that. And as a company, if you're not able to deliver that, you better be open to the idea of. So I think these are some big 6 or 7 trends that will play out. Uh, Lastly, while I've said all this, I think for the next 10 to 15 years, as the baby boomers and the Generation X folks that are there on this panel, we still continue to hold sway in terms of driving profitability of the banks. So though we are a smaller percentage, and increasingly as we walk into the sunset and you have more millennials and centennials coming to the fore and taking charge, that is still at least a 10 to 15 year period. So maybe in the next 10 to 15 years, you will still have the prevalence of a phygital model where we are more comfortable, doing deals with relationship managers over a cup of coffee, bottle of beer. So I think, for the next 10, 15 years, you could have a coexistence of physical and digital. But I think increasingly, companies will need to build from 2030 and beyond. And 2030 and beyond, from how I see it today, it's going to be increasingly digital and it's going to be predominantly digital. So that's my take on where we are headed, Anupam.
Yeah, thanks, Ashutosh. I think you have broadly covered the entire spectrum of the trends which are happening, whether it is technology investment, CEOs being on top of it, UI, UX, to new stacks being required, and the emergence of neo-banking. I don't know whether to call it neo-banking or not. We are kind of creating a bank, entity at Jupiter, which is like a digital bank. And I think the governor said a couple of months back that there will be a new stack of banking which will emerge and which will be a layover over the existing banks. And that's exactly a new banking. So just to touch upon it as to whether we are getting into that phase of invisible banking or not, we are certainly here. And as Ashutosh was saying that with entire NPCI stack and Aadhaar stack, we have slowly got into the APIification of banking completely. And although in Europe, in US or in Brazil markets like Monzo by N26, Revolut, they approached it differently and their realities were different. In India, the realities are different. But one thing which is common is consumer experience. And that consumer experience, we still feel is quite broken. So today, when you access a Zomato or a Swiggy app, an Amazon or a Flipkart app, you read news on shorts or TOI. You have choice and preferences of what you like. But I think in the Indian context, most of the financial services or banking apps look very similar, and therefore there is a huge need to differentiate. And a lot of people ask me, so what will neobanks do which banks have not done till now? And I said that, yeah, I mean, differentiation is something which is a continuous exercise. So to a customer who earns 50,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees and 50,000 rupees is lying in his bank account, that is wealth for him, right? And have banks provided that wealth management to those consumers? What when a consumer has to borrow 10,000 rupees, can he reach out to a bank and say, hey, you know what, I just want 10,000 rupees? Does consumer know that last service request which he the last service request which he placed, what is the status of it? So we are getting, and with UPI, consumers have more or less said that they are agnostic to accessing their bank accounts, doing payments and transactions anywhere through any interface. So we have got into that phase, and this next 10 years will be a multiplication of invisible banking, and that's where we are trying to kind of create this difference. Ashish, you are in a domain which is very different on the banking space and have been doing exemplary work with a particular sector and consumer. Before even giving a banking license, I think you were doing a very exemplary work in driving financial services and inclusion in a particular segment. How do you see this entire digital space panning out in that?
So, Anupam, I'll just add on to what Ashutosh and you brought out. If I look at the new banks which are now kind of coming up, I look at it as an opportunity for banks like us. The main thing I would say is to align partnerships, to align with fintechs or neobanks, which are looking at a similar customer segment. As long as your customer segmentation target is same, you can actually go out there and achieve non-linear growth. Because in today's world, Bharat is changing, and Bharat is going to be more digital than it has ever been before in the next 3 to 5 years. And hence, this is the time to forge partnerships with like-minded neobanks to reach out to the customer in a much faster manner. And if there is a partner who has an expertise of giving a user experience is his forte, then you can couple the products for that from a banking standpoint and forge that partnership. And I think that's the way forward. One of those threads that can be picked up. Back to you, Anupam.
I mean, I am very excited to hear of banks talking about partnerships with neobanks. Obviously, makes me a lot excited. And to take this journey forward, I think another aspect is the amount of automation which is happening in the ecosystem. Someone who leads this in HSBC, Simar, how do you see this entire robotic processes, the entire bot piece? Do you think this is going to be a reality, and how soon will that be a reality? What will the exact consumer experience be? As a consumer, I still feel that there are a lot of broken elements.
So thank you, Anupam. Very good, very nice segue to the themes that Ashutosh and Ashish you brought together. I represent an international bank. We just to give a perspective, HSBC has 39 million customers across 66 markets, and we do a huge volume base of transactions. So we would issue 23 million cards in a year. We would open 9 million accounts in a year, and things like that. With the number of payments that we transact, we process about 4 billion payments on a regular basis. And historically, even till 2015, 2016, it was all paper based, it was all manual, it was all people dependent. Uh, so the amount of infrastructure required to be able to support it was just humongous. So as of today, um, we have 52,000 employees spread across 7 different countries, servicing this entire megalith for all practical purposes. And over the last few years, we've very aggressively started looking at how do we play with the strengths of machines and humans together. Be it data analytics, be it using RPA to resolve for opening accounts quickly, doing chatbots to be able to answer transactions. We've we are screening transaction or financial crime details automated in an automated manner at a much higher accuracy. Now, a lot of people in these subsequent questions ask for the fact that if robots are coming, are humans going anywhere? And I keep sharing this time and time again. Boeing planes were flown by two pilots who were running the machine to fly the plane. Even today, there are two pilots, but a computer is running the plane. But we need these pilots to be able to manage those computers well. So we do have 52,000 employees that are still doing a much more higher value add activity. Like Ashutosh mentioned, upskilling and reskilling is the name of the game. And that is what we are leveraging across the board. COVID has clearly accelerated this entire journey. Just in Singapore and Malaysia, 1.8 million customers have migrated to digital channels, which were not on digital channels. So how do we as a bank incorporate the automation capability that exists to be able to do these transactions in a much more seamless manner?
I think great. I think Simar had a contrary point of view from a human angle, what Ashutosh had on deploying the same people. Ashish, a very quick, 20 seconds. Do you see yourself also deploying bots, or what will be that mid path in the segment of banking which you spoke about?
So, Anupam, just to quickly give you a perspective, we are a 2.5-year-old bank. We do about 4,000 crores of DMT in a month. We do about three APS and micro ATM combined together about 6,000 crores a month. We are the largest deployer of micro ATM. Now, with all this, in 2.5 years, we already feel the need and are in the process of doing robotic process automation for about 11 processes internally. Our chatbots have gone live. So this is not something that you do, which is a talking point. To my mind, it is a necessity today. You can look at it from an angle of productivity. You look at it from an angle of hygiene. You look at it from a zero error syndrome. You look at it from any angle. It's a value add to the organization, and the faster you imbibe this, the better it is. The other aspect that I just want to put on the table is that when you are going specifically for bots, you need to realize that bot and AI or RPA and AI are combined together. So please don't think of it as a magic wand. And especially if you're trying to do regional languages, you will need to learn. The bot learns, and you will need to have that patience and back up your teams. But it's a culture that you need to drive internally because it is no longer an option; it's a necessity. Back to you, Anupam.
Yeah. So I think my next question in this is to existing organizations. They are not new, but they are rapidly wanting to transform themselves, and they are transforming themselves. One banking and one NBFC. So, Manish Shah, what do you see in this entire transformation journey? An existing large bank like you, who is demonstrating a lot of digital capabilities, both internally and externally, going ahead in this journey in terms of technology stack, in terms of consumer offering, and in terms of a culture change within the organization.
Okay. Hi. Hi, great. So Manish here. I think your question is also very interesting. See, the way we see in Kotak Bank, is slowly the digital is allowing a banks to become more customer centric. Mostly banks used to be more product centric or bottom line centric. Today, realizing is that unless your business model contains customer experience, you cannot go ahead. So we see technology itself is not a strategy. It is very clear on your business model in your customer segment, and then see how technology can create a disruptive business model, excellent customer service, and how do I use technology to deliver that experience. That is stitching together very important. Otherwise, it's a one size fits all, and now you can use same technology anywhere. So I feel as a bank, it's very important to know your business model and then see whether technology helps. Now, let me pick up an area of chatbot, which is also very interesting thing, and a lot of time it becomes a fad. See, it's important to know where does it connect with the and the bank employee, because today in digital world, if you do something right, it gives you a win-win-win proposition, and that's normally used to not happen. There's always a maybe win or lose. Now I think a great technology, a digital implementation allows you to do win-win-win. Now, if you see in the past, banking was always conversational. Right? It was never automated. You go to branch or you go to contact center, or if you're a HNI, you get a RM. You used to always talk to a human in your own natural language, right? And that person will convert into banking language. If I have a problem with my card, if I call my RM or I go to branch, I will say, madam, this is what happening with my card. Maybe I lost my card, for example, right? The person will convert into technical language. Okay, sir, I understand that you lost a card. So fill this form, sign it. We will replace the card to you and give it in 4 days, right? Earlier, that is to happen by conversation. Now, that's what we most of our comfortable was. And I think it used to give you that customer touch. However, if you realize sometimes there was always a chance of mistrust also. When I'm talking to a human, somewhere there's a chance of not being a standard in the process, or there could be kind of mistrust happening. There's always like some cases where somebody go to branch for a fixed deposit fixing, and somewhere that person converted into a life insurance policy. I heard some of the cases and dealt with it also. Now, when online came, online solved the problem in a very different way. Online became 24/7. It becomes simple to access. It's reachable in every part of the India. Right? That become but if you see, there was a learning curve. Earlier, if I deal with 5 banks, the branch process or contact process was same. I used to go to any of those banks, say my problem. That person will convert into his language, his form. Just I have to sign. I have to just say yes. Works to get done, right? However, if I use say online banking of 5 banks, they all have a different experience. They have different controls, different login mechanism, different layouts, right? And plus, if you see, most of the banking systems are built like a catalog, right? If you go to net banking or mobile app, you will see 100 buttons. You click on a button, you will finally see a form with a submit button, right? And you have to be slightly intelligent to understand where you click. If I go to the card menu and my card is blocked, like I lost the card, maybe the menu will tell me 3 links. To block card, click here. To lock card, click here. To hotlist a card, click here, right? As a customer, I will have no clue what does it mean, right? And that's why if you see, somewhere banking is starting to become a sometimes problem for the customer. That's where when people used to get stuck in a digital channel, there's a problem. Because they go to offline channels have no clue what happened in digital, how to solve it, and customers used to have a problem. Now, what we have seen in banking, in Kotak Bank, the chatbot becomes a sweet spot between these two. And what we have seen is, instead of seeing a chatbot as a standalone channel, because anything new thing happens in digital, you have to always see is a fad or is a trend. In the fad earlier, people said chatbot will be the app killer, it can kill everything. Only thing you need is a chat icon in front of customer and say what you want to do today, and the whole thing can happen by just one icon, right? And that's what the lot, I think, fad coming up. What we see in the trend after really spending hard work in making a chatbot succeed is that chatbot actually you have to see which makes your digital experience an integrated experience. So we as well think a mobile net will continue. Our chat will become a supplementary to it. It makes it the digital experience integrated. Why? Because chatbot, if you ask me, is a sweet spot between both two. It allows the customer to talk in natural language. That is very important for the customer doesn't know how do I say in technical language, right? I may use English, I may use simple English, I may use English, but I can use my own language. Hopefully, chatbot should solve it. Second, it becomes single window also. As a customer, it's very important to feel that I have a one window and I can go there and that can solve the problem for me, right? And obviously, chatbot supports by text, image, steps, and the links, which normally a mobile app screen used to never do it. We realized that the chatbot has started to solve that problem for the customers. Again, I feel India being a very large country, heterogeneous country, similarly a bank like us being a very large bank, you have lots of outliers. One solution cannot take care of everybody. Right? Like in India, even now, the SMS banking and USSD banking is still not over. There are still people who are using it, and when we talk to them, they're pretty happy to continue using that, right? That segment will also remain. You need to have an omnichannel approach. But that same way, we think chatbot is not going to solve all the problem. It is a journey. However, you have to also see chatbot technically. Now, when we started again, people are super ambitious of chatbot. We thought it can solve everything. It can be a glorified search engine. It can usher customer to the right section in the mobile app. It takes care of all questions. It will do all transactions. You want to do a fund transfer, I'll pay for a chatbot screen. And people say, why not it goes to next level? Why it can't give me insights about my account? Why it can't give me advice about my account, right? Now, if your theory that it's an artificial intelligence system, it has its own intelligence, it can do everything, right, technically. But what you're realizing is it's going to be a very, very long journey. What you need to look at chatbot is that, can it be integrated to, say, net banking, mobile banking? Can it start to first solve basic problems? And customer sees is an alternate channel. So I typically come to mobile and a net to do a transaction. But if I issue, I'm stuck somewhere, I have a complaint, I have a problem, I don't know how to do it, then can chatbot be the logical place to solve that problem? Once you get a customer on that, why that simple proposition, it is there to help you. Because of any doubt issue, come here. Later you upgrade customers to maybe, take care of his transactions, take care of insight. Slowly we can upgrade the customer to the next level of engagement in a chatbot. And I'll see that has been a journey with us. One, start small, start in a focused way. Second, be very patient. And it's important in digital, I think, sometimes to under promise and think of a normal delivery. I think that becomes a better way to succeed instead of trying to talk too many things and then fail there.
Yeah, I think Manish, very valid points. I think anything which starts initially, whether it was ATMs, core banking, internet banking, and mobile started as alternate channels. They are no longer alternate channels in banking. And I come to this interesting point, and finally, Manish Jaiswal leads something which makes money for most of the financial institutions, which is lending, and just lending on the fly, and how lending on the fly is making credit available with more and more information. Yeah, does it have any pitfalls? How do you see those pitfalls getting managed? Fraud? Will specific channels lead to higher delinquency? What do you think on this digital transformation route of even NBFCs? Where are they headed to, Manish?
Thank you, Anupam. I think first of all, I must say that we all have been through a terrific BCP, but today I saw a panel continuity plan actually emerge for the first time. I'm glad that that the show went on despite the unfortunate event in the beginning. And I also learned a lot from this panel. So with all humility, I must mention that most of you being on the payment and transaction sides and we being on the lending side, there is certainly a lot between a neobank and a non-bank in terms of collaboration opportunities, which crises like this open up. I would just like to say that over last 3 crises, not even going to back to 100 years, last 10 years, we had our Prime Minister drive the entire Jam Trinity, which kind of saw almost a 13 million JDY accounts opening. That was the first time when the semi-urban rural customers who we bank with right now, almost 100% of customers we onboard now have a bank account. Earlier, they would not have a bank account, and we had to do collect cash from them, and we had to kind of look at loans from them. After that crisis, then the next big was Demon, which was the self-precipitated human crisis. And while everybody can say anything, but that drove people toward digitization, the next step. After Demon came GST. So almost all entrepreneurs in the country above a certain turnover have to have a GST number, and that is again driving digitization. And now the biggest CIO or CTO is Mr. COVID himself. So I would feel that almost so digitization really is no more a luxury; it's a necessity, it's an obligation. At Magma, what we have clearly seen is that we believe that the entire conventional process of underwriting will be buried. It will be a very quiet requirement without too many people knowing about it. It's already happening. As we speak, over this pandemic in last 90 days, our teams have digitally delivered 17 crore of government subvention into customers' loan account to over 6,000 customers. Our teams have disbursed the government's emergency credit line called the GECL, the Guaranteed Emergency Credit Line, into customers' loan account. At the back end, our entire digital process has got massively accelerated. I mean, I can only tell you that we were lucky that over last 8 years, we had almost every customer more than 200 data points, and we had 50,000 customers. Using 1 million data points, we were able to create our own digital scoring engine called M-Score. M-Score is now live. It hooks onto a digital platform. It is on the BYD device of our frontline teams. You meet a customer, and across the table, you can tell um, whether credit is on the fly or whether the credit is going to fall in a pitfall. So I think at the back end, there's a lot of engine which is running, which is the APIs. And I think the APIs are only growing. There are more and more fintechs. I see there'll be lesser competition, more collaboration. I'm not even looking at 2030 for a planning. 2020 is a year of survival. I think survival precedes profitability. So these are the times where I would urge that there's a lot of capital cushion, there's a deep investment in technology, and the the highest amount of disintermediation we can do, giving the fantastic UX. I think that is something which will be very uh, 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 eminent and absolutely valued from existential perspective. Otherwise, I personally believe that those who will not embark on this journey, them actually might face existential crisis. So back to all of you. Thank you.
I think, Manish, I'll borrow this word called silent underwriting from you. Looks pretty cool. I think from that personal interview to not knowing anything and still giving a loan to a consumer, we have traveled a long way. I think the width of topics which we covered were amazing, right? I mean, Ashutosh spoke about changing trends, how CEOs need to adapt. To Deep Simar saying that the planes are still flying, two people are flying, but computer is making them. Ashish was emphatic about how the segment that they own is driving digitization. And being a Kotak consumer myself, Manish has been always driving chat and chatbots. And in the next coming years, it will only get refined. I'm sure it is just the starting point. So I think the width of discussion in 45 minutes was absolutely great, fantastic. The APIification of banking is up here to stay, and new business models, as we spoke, will emerge. And business models always look hazy when we start, but as time progresses, clarity emerges. So, Madhav, I will hand over to you after this interesting discussion with such a diverse panel. And thank you for this opportunity on behalf of all the panel members.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bakshi. It was really a wonderful session. Thanks for covering, and special thanks to all the panel members and Bakshi to handle it very well. Even though the beginning of the panel was little glitch, I request all of you to kindly log off, and thank you so much for your presence. We look forward to connect with you future. Thank you so much, all. Thank you, Bakshi. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Ashish. Thank you, Mr. Jaiswal. Thank you, Mr. Singh
you.
and Mr. Shah. Nice
Thank
having
you.
you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you
Bye
very
bye.
much. Thank you.